Ethan Caldwell strode through the glass doors of his towering Manhattan office building, the early morning sun reflecting off the chrome and steel around him. The streets buzzed with the usual chaos of New York City, yellow cabs honking, pedestrians navigating the crowded sidewalks, coffee cups steaming in hurried hands. But Ethan saw none of it. His eyes scanned the financial district with the cold detachment of a man who had been elevated far above the struggles of ordinary life. His tailored navy suit fit perfectly, and the polished shoes clicked on the marble floor as he made his way to the elevator. In his world, efficiency, precision, and control were everything. Empathy, he had long decided, was optional. In the elevator, Ethan checked his reflection in the mirrored doors, straightening his tie. There was an unmistakable pride in his posture, a subtle arrogance in the tilt of his chin. Yet, behind the practiced composure, there was a flicker of unease, a sensation he had become skilled at suppressing. Money and power had given him comfort, influence, and status, but something deeper remained elusive. He glanced at his reflection again and imagined the life of someone simpler, someone unburdened by stock options, boardroom battles, and relentless ambition. The thought made him uneasy, and he quickly shook it off. Weakness had no place in his world. As he stepped out of the elevator onto the 42nd floor, the office sprawled before him like a city in miniature, glass partitions, modern art, and the low hum of focused activity. Ethan's assistant, a poised young woman named Claire, greeted him with the usual report of meetings and deadlines. She was competent, efficient, and polite, a mirror of the professional environment Ethan thrived in. There were no surprises here, no unpredictability. He liked it that way. Yet even as he nodded at her briefing, he noticed a subtle emptiness creeping in, a quiet tension that had become familiar in recent months. The corporate world demanded everything from him, his time, his focus, his relentless drive to outperform rivals. He had earned every dollar, had built Caldwell Enterprises from a small tech startup into a multinational powerhouse. The accolades, the awards, the media attention, they all painted a picture of perfection, success, and influence. But behind the doors of his private life, things were different. Ethan's marriage to Vanessa, once a partnership of ambition and affection, had grown strained. They shared a home, a life, and appearances, but little else. Conversations were often strategic or surface level, laughter had become rare. Their teenage daughter, Lily, had retreated into her own world of music, friends, and school activities, leaving Ethan feeling a subtle ache of disconnect he didn't know how to bridge. After a morning of high-level meetings, mergers, and stock analysis, Ethan finally stepped outside for a brief moment of fresh air. The streets below were alive, but he moved with the same detachment that marked every interaction with the world outside his elite bubble. Businesspeople scurried by, tourists gawked at towering skyscrapers, and street vendors called out for attention. In a narrow corner near a busy crosswalk, Ethan noticed a young street musician playing a violin. The man was unremarkable in appearance, dressed in worn clothing, his case open for coins. Yet, the music was soulful, threading through the chaos of the city with a sincerity Ethan had long forgotten. A smirk crept across his face. To Ethan, this man represented everything trivial about the world below him: effort without reward, passion without practicality, a life of struggle and invisibility. Ethan tossed $1 into the violin case, leaning slightly toward the man, his voice sharp and tinged with mockery. "Keep practicing, maybe one day someone like me will notice." His laugh carried an edge, an arrogance born from years of unchecked success. The street musician glanced up, eyes calm yet tinged with hurt, acknowledging the coin but not the mockery. Ethan walked away, not realizing the seed of consequence he had just planted. Even in the midst of his arrogance, Ethan couldn't ignore the subtle tug in his chest. The music lingered, hauntingly beautiful, carrying with it an emotion he hadn't felt in years. It reminded him of nights in suburban Connecticut when he was a boy, of his mother humming lullabies, of simple joys before the relentless pursuit of wealth consumed him. Those memories were brief, fragile, and quickly buried beneath the armor of his adult life. He shook his head, attributing the discomfort to fatigue, yet a quiet unease followed him as he entered his luxury sedan waiting curbside. The contrast between Ethan's world and the ordinary life outside was stark. Across the street, children played hopscotch in the cracked pavement, their laughter ringing through the morning air. A small group of friends shared coffee on a stoop, joking and teasing each other. Nearby, a couple argued softly in a storefront window, a fleeting display of intimacy and imperfection. All of it, chaotic, imperfect, alive, was a world Ethan had long ceased to inhabit. In his pursuit of control, perfection, and status, he had distanced himself from the unpredictable beauty of human connection. As he drove toward his next meeting, Ethan's mind wandered, though he fought the distraction. He thought of Vanessa's subdued smile at breakfast, of Lily quietly doodling in her notebook, of the strange ache in his chest that the musician's song had stirred. His life was enviable by every conventional measure: the apartment overlooking Central Park, the sleek sports car, the private gym, the exclusive social clubs. Yet, in that brief encounter with a man on the street, a chord had been struck that money couldn't silence. Ethan entered the towering lobby of Caldwell Enterprises, greeted by assistants, colleagues, and a low hum of ambition. Everything was polished, orderly, and predictable. He straightened his tie again, smiling politely, masking the subtle disturbance that lingered in his thoughts. The city, alive and chaotic, continued around him, oblivious to the internal friction growing inside one of its wealthiest residents. Here, in the heart of power, the story of arrogance, privilege, and missed human connection was just beginning, and the events of a single street corner would soon ripple through Ethan's meticulously constructed world, threatening to unravel the illusion of control he had spent decades building. Brooklyn had its own rhythm, one far removed from the polished corridors of Manhattan's financial district. The streets were lined with brownstones, graffiti murals that whispered untold stories, and corner cafes that brewed coffee thick with aroma and character. It was here, amidst the clatter of subway trains and the chatter of neighbors, that Sammy Torres made his living. A man in his late 30s, Sammy carried the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, yet his presence was marked by quiet dignity. His violin case, scuffed and worn from years of use, rested at his feet as he drew his bow across the strings, producing a melody that seemed to suspend time itself. Sammy's background had been anything but easy. Born to a Puerto Rican-American family in the Bronx, he had grown up facing poverty, systemic obstacles, and countless closed doors. Yet music had always been his refuge, his way of making sense of a world that often seemed indifferent. His mother had raised him alone after his father disappeared, and she was now in her late 60s, struggling with health issues. Sammy's motivation went beyond passion. He played to provide for her, to give her comfort, to ensure she never felt forgotten. Every note carried the weight of his love, sacrifice, and resilience. The morning sun filtered through the gaps in the buildings, casting streaks of light on the cracked pavement where Sammy performed. Passers-by dropped coins into his case, some glancing only briefly, others stopping to let the music wash over them. Children tugged at their parents' hands, mesmerized by the soulful sound, while a few elderly residents paused on benches, letting the familiar strains bring back memories of days long past. The scene was a microcosm of American urban life, diverse, imperfect, and alive. Sammy, despite the hardships, radiated a quiet strength that made even the bustling chaos seem harmonious. It was during one of these morning performances that Ethan Caldwell had walked by. The memory lingered in Sammy's mind, how a man in a tailored suit had tossed $1 into his open case, accompanied by a smirk and words of mockery. Sammy had looked up briefly, meeting Ethan's gaze, and responded not with anger but with the calm acceptance of someone who understood the inequalities of the world. The dollar was appreciated, but the condescension stung more than the absence of money ever could. In his line of work, respect mattered far more than currency. And yet, Sammy didn't let bitterness take root. He continued playing, drawing every ounce of emotion from his instrument, channeling his struggles into something transcendent. Life on the streets demanded a certain kind of resilience. Each day presented new challenges, unpredictable weather, police warnings, and the constant judgment of those who couldn't see past appearances. Sammy's hands bore the marks of years of hard labor, his fingers calloused and agile, capable of coaxing melodies that many professional musicians struggle to produce. Yet it wasn't just technical skill that made him extraordinary, it was his ability to connect emotionally with anyone who listened. He played with a story behind every note, a human truth that no luxury penthouse, corporate boardroom, or stock market ticker could replicate. Between performances, Sammy checked his mother's medications, helped neighbors with small errands, and navigated the bureaucratic maze of healthcare appointments. He had dreams, yes, but they were rooted in survival and the well-being of those he loved rather than in personal fame or fortune. His humility was both a shield and a strength. It kept him grounded, allowed him to see the beauty in small things, and reminded him that life's richness wasn't measured in money but in acts of care and connection. One afternoon, a small crowd gathered as Sammy played an old, soulful tune that had once been popular in his mother's youth. The children danced to the rhythm, elderly listeners closed their eyes, and passers-by slowed their pace to absorb the music. Ethan, passing by once again on his way to a luxury car waiting nearby, paused only momentarily, smirking as if to dismiss the importance of the scene. Sammy noticed, of course, but he didn't let it break his focus. Every note he played was an act of defiance against the apathy of the world, a subtle reminder that beauty and humanity persisted even in spaces that society often ignored. Sammy's internal life was just as rich as his musical skill. He often reflected on his childhood, remembering moments of tenderness from his mother, the struggles of growing up in a neighborhood that demanded toughness, and the brief joys of community celebrations. These memories fueled his music, giving it depth and authenticity. Unlike Ethan, who had been taught to measure success in dollars, titles, and appearances, Sammy's victories were quieter but no less significant. They were victories of survival, resilience, integrity, and love. As days passed, the contrast between Sammy and Ethan's lives became more pronounced. Where Ethan's days were dictated by schedules, numbers, and social status, Sammy's were guided by rhythm, emotion, and human connection. And yet, despite this contrast, their worlds were on a collision course. The brief encounter in Manhattan had planted a seed, one that neither man fully understood yet. For Sammy, it was a challenge. Could someone who seemed so distant and privileged ever recognize the value of what he offered? For Ethan, it was an opportunity for awakening, though he had no idea it awaited him just around the corner of his carefully curated life. Cinematic close-ups reveal Sammy's expressions as he plays, eyebrows furrowed in concentration, lips pressed gently, eyes occasionally glistening with the weight of unspoken emotion. The audience is drawn into his world, understanding that each note carries not just musical skill, but lived experience, sacrifices, and dreams deferred. Through sound design, the violin cuts through the ambient noise of the city, isolating Sammy and his music from the chaotic backdrop, creating a moment of quiet intimacy in a bustling urban environment. By the end of the day, as the sun dipped toward the horizon and the city began to glow with streetlights, Sammy packed his violin away, his case heavier with coins but richer in spirit. He walked home slowly, carrying both the physical and emotional weight of the day. Each step resonated with purpose, care for his mother, commitment to his art, and the quiet hope that one day, someone would see the truth behind the music, beyond appearances, beyond wealth and status. The world around him moved on, largely indifferent, but the street musician's song lingered, an unseen current that connected him to lives far beyond his own. And somewhere, in the distance, Ethan Caldwell would come to realize that the melody he had mocked held the power to awaken a man who had long forgotten what it meant to feel, to care, and to truly live. Ethan Caldwell sat in his penthouse office, the city skyline sprawling like a glittering constellation through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room, reflecting off the polished mahogany desk and the awards lining the shelves. He stared at the city below, the streets alive with the ordinary chaos of people going about their lives, cabs honking, pedestrians rushing, street performers echoing with distant melodies. It was the same city where he had mocked the street musician only days before, yet now, for the first time, the memory lingered with an unfamiliar weight. That fleeting encounter, meant to amuse him, had burrowed into his consciousness, and he found himself thinking about it far more than he wanted. Ethan's mind drifted to the man he had mocked, Sammy Torres, the street musician whose violin had carried such raw emotion. Ethan couldn't admit it, not even to himself, but there had been a quality in Sammy's music that pricked at something long dormant inside him. It was authenticity, unpolished yet profound, and it stirred a part of Ethan he had meticulously suppressed, a part that once believed in human connection, in vulnerability, in meaning beyond money. His assistant, Claire, knocked softly, holding a stack of papers. "You're 5 o'clock with the investors," she said, but Ethan barely registered her words. He waved her off, muttering that he'd handle it later. Flashbacks crept into Ethan's thoughts. He remembered his own childhood in suburban Connecticut, where evenings had been spent playing catch in the yard, listening to his mother's gentle reminders about kindness and humility. He remembered the hunger for approval from his father, the silent lessons that power and status were everything, and the competitive drive that had propelled him from a small-town boy to the multimillionaire he was now. Those memories were bittersweet, tinged with regret. He had won at the cost of intimacy, empathy, and human connection, and the realization was quietly unsettling. Meanwhile, across town, Sammy returned home to his modest apartment above a small bakery. The smell of freshly baked bread wafted through the stairwell as he carried his violin case, coins jingling inside. His mother, Isabel, greeted him with a soft smile, her frail hands clutching a cup of tea. "Did you play well today, Mijo?" she asked gently. Sammy shook his head, a wry smile forming. "Better than yesterday, Mama." Someone even laughed at me, of all people. She raised an eyebrow, not in judgment, but in quiet understanding. Sammy laughed softly. "It's okay. They don't understand, but the music matters. That's enough for me." The warmth in this scene contrasts starkly with Ethan's cold office, emphasizing the difference between wealth and human connection, privilege and humility. Back in Manhattan, Ethan made a decision that surprised even himself. On a whim, spurred partly by curiosity and partly by a strange unease in his chest, he drafted a public challenge to the street musician. Not a cruel challenge, or so he told himself, but one designed to entertain his social circle at a charity gala. He imagined it as harmless fun, a small spectacle to amuse wealthy friends and colleagues. The idea was both audacious and arrogant. He would invite Sammy to perform in front of Manhattan's elite and see if the man could rise to the occasion. In Ethan's mind, it was a light-hearted test, a way to measure talent against wealth, passion against polish. The next day, Ethan met with his rival, Gregory Lane, a man whose success was as sharp as his tongue. Gregory smirked when Ethan mentioned his plan. "You're serious? You want to parade a street performer in front of the entire city's elite?" Ethan nodded, masking a flicker of uncertainty with confidence. "It's harmless. A little entertainment for the gala. And, perhaps a lesson in humility, for him, not me." Gregory chuckled, unaware of the deeper transformation that had begun to stir in Ethan. The conversation highlighted the contrasting moral frameworks between the characters. Gregory thrives on mockery and social dominance, whereas Ethan, unknowingly, is on the cusp of self-reflection. Meanwhile, Sammy received the unexpected invitation. A well-dressed courier handed him an envelope sealed with crisp stationery, the text inside formal yet respectful. The words invited him to perform at an upcoming charity gala in Manhattan. At first, Sammy hesitated. The request was out of his comfort zone, a world he had only glimpsed from afar. The thought of performing in front of the wealthy and powerful, many of whom had no understanding of struggle or authenticity, was intimidating. Yet, he looked at his mother, her eyes soft with encouragement. She reminded him gently that opportunities were rare, and that if his music could serve a purpose, if it could help someone, if it could provide even a little stability, then it was worth stepping forward. With a quiet nod, Sammy accepted. The tension between the two men began to crystallize. Ethan saw this as a playful test of superiority, a chance to reinforce the boundaries between wealth and struggle, while Sammy approached it with pragmatism and hope, motivated not by pride, but by responsibility to his family and community. Cinematic techniques highlight the contrast: Ethan's polished, sterile office versus Sammy's humble, intimate apartment, the sharp angles of Manhattan skyscrapers versus the warm, lived-in textures of Brooklyn brownstones. Emotional stakes grow as the audience begins to sense that this meeting of worlds will have consequences neither man can predict. The following days are a delicate dance of preparation, reflection, and anticipation. Ethan informs his social circle with a mixture of pride and mischief, speaking of the street musician with subtle condescension. Meanwhile, Sammy rehearses tirelessly, seeking perfection not for ego, but for dignity and purpose. He encounters obstacles, a sudden violin string break, a moment of self-doubt, but each challenge strengthens his resolve. This section emphasizes the contrast between preparation for personal gain and preparation for genuine purpose, reinforcing the story's core moral themes. The narrative also delves into Ethan's family life, providing a glimpse of the emotional void that wealth has created. Vanessa notices his preoccupation and probes gently, sensing a shift in her husband's behavior. Lily, intuitive and compassionate, asks questions about the musician that Ethan struggles to answer. These interactions provide subtle foreshadowing, planting seeds for character growth and emotional reconciliation. The audience begins to anticipate a moral reckoning. Can a man accustomed to control and mockery learn humility when confronted with genuine talent and humanity? As the section closes, both men are poised on the threshold of an event that promises tension, growth, and transformation. Ethan, with his polished arrogance, imagines the spectacle as his amusement. Sammy, with quiet courage, imagines it as a step toward a better life for his mother and himself. The stakes are emotional, moral, and social, intertwining privilege and struggle, hubris and humility. The audience is left with a sense of anticipation and unease. A challenge has been set, but its consequences will reach far beyond the moment of performance. The evening of the charity gala arrived like a glittering promise, set in a luxurious Manhattan ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. Chandeliers hung like cascading stars, their crystal facets reflecting on polished marble floors and tailored tuxedos. The air was perfumed with expensive fragrances, the subtle mix of designer cologne and floral arrangements, while servers in crisp white jackets carried trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The crowd, a carefully curated collection of Manhattan's elite, mingled with practiced smiles, discussing business deals, investments, and social appearances. Yet amidst all the opulence, one man stood slightly out of place, Sammy Torres, clutching his violin case, stepping into a world far removed from the streets he called home. Sammy's entrance drew brief glances of curiosity and polite amusement. His attire was modest, a simple blazer over a shirt that had seen better days, and his shoes bore the marks of countless walks across Brooklyn sidewalks. To many in the crowd, he was an outsider, a novelty act, a fleeting source of entertainment. Yet there was an undeniable aura about him, humility intertwined with quiet confidence, and a presence that demanded attention without demanding ego. He set up his instrument with meticulous care, ensuring that every note would convey the depth of his experience, the stories of hardship and resilience carried through the strings of his violin. Ethan Caldwell watched from the edge of the ballroom, perfectly composed in his tailored suit, yet internally a storm of emotions churned. He had imagined this moment countless times over the past week, the street musician fumbling, the elite guests smirking, the subtle amusement of seeing someone from below brought into his world. Yet as he observed Sammy, a strange disquiet took root. There was no anxiety in the way Sammy held himself, no sense of inferiority, only determination. Ethan felt a twitch of something unfamiliar, admiration, unease, perhaps even guilt. He tried to dismiss it, focusing on his own reflection in the polished surfaces around the room, but the music waiting to be played hung like a tension-filled promise in the air. As the orchestra pit, an improvised corner with minimal lighting, was set, guests began to murmur, speculating about the quality of the performance. Some whispered among themselves, eager to witness what they assumed would be a quaint, perhaps even comical, act. Gregory Lane, Ethan's rival, leaned close with a sly grin. This is going to be entertaining. I can't wait to see how far your friend from the streets gets before he falters, he said, chuckling at his own cruelty. Ethan forced a polite smile, but inwardly, he felt the smallest stirrings of doubt. What if this performance revealed something more profound than he anticipated? Sammy took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a brief moment before placing the bow on the strings. The first notes were tentative, the sound delicate yet piercing, slicing through the chatter and clinking glasses of the ballroom. Then, as he settled into the rhythm, the music grew in confidence, weaving a narrative that spoke of struggle, hope, and resilience. Cinematic focus captured the reactions of the audience, a child's eyes widening in awe, an elderly couple leaning closer to hear the story in each note, and even a few wealthy socialites pausing mid-conversation, captivated by the unexpected beauty before them. Ethan felt the first genuine tremor of emotion as the melody reached him. The arrogance he had carried so effortlessly seemed to falter under the weight of the music. It wasn't just technical skill, it was truth, humanity, and soul distilled into sound. He glanced around the room, realizing that several other guests were visibly moved, wiping discreet tears, clutching hands, or simply closing their eyes in quiet absorption. The performance, simple in execution yet profound in essence, transcended social boundaries. For a moment, the room was not a gathering of Manhattan's elite, it was a shared space of emotion, connection, and unspoken understanding. As the final notes lingered in the air, the audience erupted into polite applause that quickly grew into genuine appreciation. Ethan's smirk faded completely, replaced by a tightening in his chest he could not rationalize. Sammy bowed slightly, his eyes scanning the room, resting briefly on Ethan with no hint of resentment, only quiet dignity. In that glance, Ethan felt the first pangs of introspection, the realization that he had judged a man not for his character or talent, but for the superficial markers of society, clothing, status, and wealth. The contrast between the worlds was now painfully clear. Ethan's opulent surroundings, his wealth, and the curated perfection of his life suddenly felt hollow against the raw authenticity of Sammy's music. He could see it in his own family as well, Vanessa's gentle smile, the subtle admiration in Lily's eyes for Sammy's courage and skill. The moment created an emotional fracture in Ethan's carefully constructed persona, an opportunity for moral reflection that he could neither ignore nor fully embrace yet. Meanwhile, Sammy remained composed, channeling every ounce of his experience into the performance. He knew this moment was more than a test of skill, it was a demonstration of the value of perseverance, humility, and authenticity. He had walked into a world designed to judge, yet he refused to play for approval. Instead, he played for truth, for his mother, for the countless people who had overlooked him and the struggles that defined him. Each note carried a story that could not be measured by applause, money, or social validation, it was measured by the human hearts it touched. Gregory Lane, who had expected to enjoy Ethan's embarrassment, found himself shifting uncomfortably. The performance was so moving that his usual cynicism faltered. He exchanged a glance with a colleague, both unsure how to react. The gala, meant to highlight wealth and influence, had been subtly transformed by something more powerful, genuine human emotion, unmediated by status or material gain. As the applause died down, the energy in the room had changed. Conversations were quieter, more reflective. Guests lingered longer by Sammy's corner, tipping more generously than before, some even complimenting him genuinely. The social hierarchy of the evening had been temporarily suspended, in that shared moment, wealth and privilege, struggle and humility, had collided and found common ground. Ethan, standing at the edge of the ballroom, felt both awe and discomfort. For the first time in decades, he questioned what truly mattered in life beyond status, wealth, and appearances. The section closes with a subtle but powerful hook, Ethan's internal transformation begins, though he does not yet fully recognize it. Sammy's music has pierced the armor of arrogance, but the story is far from over. The collision of these worlds sets the stage for reflection, conflict, and eventual moral reckoning. The audience is left anticipating the next phase. Will Ethan embrace the lesson, or retreat into the familiar safety of pride and control? The morning after the charity gala, Ethan Caldwell awoke in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, the city sprawling beneath him like a glittering sea of possibilities. Sunlight filtered through the large windows, reflecting off the polished surfaces and expensive artwork, but the usual satisfaction that accompanied his mornings was absent. He felt restless, his mind replaying the performance of the street musician, Sammy Torres, over and over. The notes, once just background noise to his privileged life, now carried a weight he could not explain. The melodies lingered, weaving through his thoughts, tugging at emotions he had long buried beneath ambition and control. Ethan moved through his morning routine mechanically, his shower, the freshly pressed suit, the perfectly brewed espresso, but his thoughts remained with Sammy. He remembered the humility in the man's posture, the emotion in his music, the dignity that had shone even under the scrutiny of Manhattan's elite. Something about that performance had unsettled him, stirring a quiet self-reflection he hadn't felt in decades. Ethan prided himself on control, on mastery of every aspect of his life, but this intrusion of emotion was unfamiliar, uncomfortable, yet strangely compelling. During breakfast, Vanessa observed him closely. She had noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor over the past week, the moments of distraction, the rare silences, the occasional furrowed brow as he stared out the window. She reached across the table, her voice gentle but probing. "Ethan, you've been different lately. Something on your mind?" Ethan, startled by the question, waved her off with a dismissive smile. "Nothing, just business." But even as he said it, he felt the falseness of the words. He knew Vanessa sensed more, as she always did, and that knowledge added a layer of unease he could not easily dismiss. Meanwhile, across town in Brooklyn, Sammy was already immersed in his daily routine. He had performed at sunrise near a bustling street corner, drawing small crowds of office workers and local residents. His fingers danced over the strings with precision, but it was the emotion behind each note, the story of perseverance, family, and hope, that captivated those who truly listened. After packing up his violin case, he walked home slowly, thinking of his mother, Isabel, who had prepared breakfast for him and left a note expressing pride in his dedication. In this modest apartment, life was simpler, but the richness lay in human connection, in love and empathy, qualities that money could not buy. Ethan's first encounters with introspection began subtly. Alone in his office later that morning, he stared at the city below and thought about the stark contrast between his world and Sammy's. His wealth, power, and meticulously curated life suddenly felt hollow compared to the authenticity he had witnessed in a man playing music on a Brooklyn sidewalk. Flashbacks of his own childhood surfaced, memories of warmth, familial connection, and the innocent joy of simpler days. The stark realization began to dawn on him: despite all his success, he had sacrificed emotional depth and human connection for status and material gain. This section delves into Ethan's internal struggle. The audience witnesses a man forced to confront the consequences of arrogance and disconnection. He begins questioning his interactions with employees, colleagues, and even his own family. The gala performance had exposed a vulnerability he had long ignored: the ability to feel deeply, to empathize, to value authenticity over appearances. Cultural context enriches this moment. Therapy, self-reflection, and mindfulness are subtle undertones, reflecting contemporary American practices for personal growth and emotional health. Ethan's reflection extends to his professional environment. He considers how his approach to business, steeped in efficiency and competition, mirrors his personal life: decisions made for power rather than purpose, relationships maintained for appearances rather than genuine connection. He recalls Gregory Lane's mocking words and realizes how often pride and ego have dictated his interactions, causing harm not only to himself but also to those around him. The guilt, though faint at first, begins to grow, providing the first seeds of a moral awakening. The narrative also examines family dynamics, highlighting the emotional void created by Ethan's life of privilege. Lily, his teenage daughter, had always seemed distant, wrapped in her own world of music, friends, and school projects. Yet after the gala, Ethan noticed subtle shifts in her demeanor: her pride in his acknowledgement of Sammy, her curiosity about the musician, and the quiet admiration she showed for qualities he had ignored for so long. These small observations struck Ethan profoundly. He realized that wealth and status could not replace the bonds of trust, understanding, and shared experiences that truly define a family. Vanessa's role in this section is equally significant. She serves as both a mirror and a moral compass, subtly guiding Ethan toward reflection without confrontation. Her observations, her questions, and her quiet support remind him of the possibility of change, of repair, of reconnection. This tension, the push and pull between ego and empathy, pride and humility, forms the emotional core of the section, keeping the audience engaged and rooting for his transformation. Simultaneously, Sammy's narrative continues, reinforcing the theme of resilience and authenticity. He performs not for recognition or applause, but for love, survival, and the joy of creating beauty in a harsh world. His actions contrast sharply with Ethan's initial worldview, offering a living example of values that transcend wealth and status. This contrast heightens the moral stakes. The audience begins to anticipate how Ethan will respond, whether he will embrace empathy and change or retreat into familiar arrogance. Cinematic techniques underscore the emotional resonance of Ethan's internal conflict. Long shots of him standing alone by the window, watching city traffic below, convey isolation amidst wealth. Close-ups on his face capture fleeting moments of doubt, regret, and introspection. Ambient city sounds, distant horns, the hum of traffic, faint strains of street music, blend with internal monologues to create a layered emotional atmosphere. The audience experiences the tension between his outer life of control and his inner stirrings of self-awareness, emphasizing the transformative potential of human connection. By the end of the section, Ethan takes tentative steps toward moral reflection. He reaches out to employees with small gestures of empathy, lingers longer at breakfast with Lily, and allows Vanessa's observations to penetrate his defensive exterior. The first lesson, subtle but profound, is clear: wealth and success are hollow without kindness, humility, and meaningful human relationships. Yet this is only the beginning. The internal awakening is nascent, fragile, and will be tested in the challenges to come. The section closes with a cinematic hook. Ethan, walking through the bustling streets of Manhattan later that day, pauses near a familiar street corner. The faint sound of a violin drifts from a distance. It is Sammy, playing with the same soulful intensity as before, unaware of the impact he has had. Ethan stops, listening intently, feeling a mixture of admiration, guilt, and longing. The music serves as a reminder that the world beyond wealth is alive, full of emotion, and profoundly human. This moment sets the stage for further transformation, leaving the audience anticipating how the collision of these two worlds will deepen in both personal and moral dimensions. Ethan Caldwell found himself walking the streets of Manhattan later that week, a rare break from the relentless schedules, boardroom battles, and meticulously organized meetings that usually consumed his life. The city, so familiar and yet often ignored, seemed different now. The chatter of pedestrians, the distant sound of car horns, the aroma of street food vendors, all of it seemed sharper, more alive. He walked slowly, almost unconsciously, until the strains of a violin reached his ears. His heart skipped, recognizing the melody instantly. Sammy Torres, the street musician whose performance at the charity gala had so unsettled him, was playing near a busy crosswalk, the city's chaos forming an unlikely stage for his art. Ethan stopped, observing from a distance. Sammy's posture was humble, his focus unwavering despite the distractions around him. People passed by without noticing, some offering coins, some only glancing, but Sammy's music poured into the air with conviction. Ethan felt a tug in his chest, an emotional resonance that he could no longer suppress. The arrogance that had once insulated him from humanity was cracking, replaced by something unfamiliar: empathy. For the first time in years, he saw the world through the eyes of someone living without privilege, someone whose life was defined by resilience, struggle, and heart. The encounter sparked reflection. Ethan thought about his own life, about the decisions that had led him here, the sacrifices of personal relationships, the relentless pursuit of wealth, the quiet neglect of emotional connections. He considered Vanessa, whose patience often went unnoticed, and Lily, who had retreated into her own world, craving understanding and connection from a father too busy to see. In Sammy, Ethan recognized qualities he had long suppressed: integrity, courage, and an unwavering commitment to what truly mattered. The contrast was jarring, yet enlightening, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about his own character. Meanwhile, Sammy, oblivious to the profound effect he was having, continued to play. Each note carried years of experience, hardship, and love for his mother, Isabel, whose health remained fragile. He played not for applause, not for recognition, but because it was his way of living authentically, of giving beauty to a world that often overlooked the invisible struggles around it. His life had taught him patience, humility, and perseverance. The simplicity of his intentions, music as a vessel for emotion and human connection, stood in stark contrast to Ethan's world of complexity, appearances, and constant striving. The juxtaposition of their lives became more apparent as Ethan lingered. He began observing not just Sammy, but the environment around him, the small acts of kindness from strangers, the interactions among the city's diverse population, the moments of human connection often overlooked in the rush of daily life. Each observation chipped away at Ethan's sense of superiority, replacing it with a curiosity and respect for the ordinary, yet profoundly meaningful, lives around him. He realized that empathy was not just an abstract concept, it was a choice, a practice, and a moral responsibility. This awakening of empathy began to influence Ethan's interactions. Back in his office, he found himself listening more intently to employees, noticing their struggles and achievements with newfound appreciation. Small gestures, a genuine compliment, a patient response, a willingness to understand rather than command, became markers of his evolving perspective. These shifts were subtle but significant, reflecting a man learning to value connection over control, people over profit. Cultural context enhances this moment. Contemporary American workplaces increasingly emphasize emotional intelligence, and Ethan's growth mirrors the societal ideal of leadership tempered by empathy. At home, Ethan's transformation extended to family life. He lingered over breakfast with Vanessa and Lily, asking questions about their lives without an agenda, listening actively, and showing curiosity and care. Conversations that once felt obligatory began to feel meaningful, bridging gaps that had widened over years of neglect. Lily, perceptive and emotionally aware, noticed the change immediately. Her guarded expression softened, and she began sharing her passions, hopes, and fears more openly. Vanessa, too, responded with gentle encouragement, realizing that the shift in Ethan was genuine. These moments, though small, laid the foundation for healing, illustrating how empathy can rekindle relationships fractured by ambition and ego. Sammy's influence extended beyond music, it became a mirror reflecting the values Ethan had overlooked. The musician's commitment to honesty, perseverance, and human dignity challenged Ethan's assumptions about success. He began questioning societal markers of worth. Was wealth truly the measure of accomplishment? Was status more important than character? These questions, once abstract, now demanded real answers as Ethan confronted the disparity between his life of privilege and Sammy's life of purpose. The moral stakes deepened, highlighting the transformative power of humility and compassion. The section also explores cinematic elements to enhance emotional impact. Long tracking shots follow Ethan as he walks through the streets, juxtaposing his polished image with the raw, vibrant world of everyday New Yorkers. Close-ups capture his moments of introspection, the furrowed brow, the slight smile of recognition, the tear threatening at the corner of his eye. Ambient sound weaves together city noise and the faint strains of Sammy's violin, creating an immersive experience that mirrors Ethan's internal awakening. The audience is drawn into the emotional journey, understanding that true change begins with noticing, feeling, and valuing the world beyond oneself. As days pass, Ethan begins to act on his growing empathy. He reaches out to charitable organizations, initially with the intent of public image enhancement, but soon finds that the act of giving and connecting with others brings genuine fulfillment. He volunteers at community events, listens to stories of struggle and triumph, and begins mentoring young professionals with a focus on ethics and compassion rather than just profit. Each action reinforces the internal transformation catalyzed by Sammy's music, showing a ripple effect where a single act of authenticity influences multiple lives. Simultaneously, Sammy continues his daily routine, unaffected by recognition or praise. His life remains grounded in purpose, not fame. Yet he notices small changes in the world around him, more people stopping to listen, a greater awareness of human struggle, subtle kindnesses extended by strangers. These interactions, though not overtly connected to Ethan, symbolize the interconnectedness of human actions. The audience begins to see the narrative thread, empathy, once awakened, grows and spreads, creating a world subtly more compassionate. The section concludes with a powerful cinematic moment. Ethan, walking late one evening through Times Square, stops again at a familiar street corner. Sammy is there, performing as the neon lights dance across the bustling crowd. Ethan stands quietly, absorbing the music, tears threatening to spill. This time, he does not smirk, nor does he feel superiority. Instead, he feels gratitude, humility, and a profound sense of connection. The scene visually captures the emotional transformation, rich Manhattan skyscrapers reflected in puddles on the street, the warm glow of neon lights contrasting with the cold city, and Ethan standing at the threshold of moral awakening, ready for the next phase of his journey. Ethan Caldwell had begun noticing subtle shifts in his own life over the past few weeks, but the true test of change came unexpectedly one Thursday morning. He was walking through his favorite Manhattan cafe, a sleek place known for artisanal coffee and hurried professionals, when he overheard a conversation that caught his attention. A young barista, speaking with a friend during a brief pause in work, was talking about a local school music program struggling for funding. The excitement in her voice was genuine, the concern for the children palpable. Something about her words struck Ethan, not as a businessman, but as a father. He paused, staring at her, feeling a sudden, uncharacteristic sense of responsibility, an urge to act that had little to do with status or image. In that moment, he thought of Sammy Torres, whose music had stirred something deep within him. Sammy had taught him, unknowingly, that courage wasn't always loud or public. Sometimes it was quiet, persistent, and rooted in purpose. The street musician's bravery, performing for strangers, risking judgment, and living authentically despite the odds, was now reflected back at Ethan as a challenge. Could he, too, step outside his comfort zone, face vulnerability, and make a meaningful difference? It was a question that resonated in his chest, almost physically, like a heartbeat demanding attention. By mid-afternoon, Ethan had made a decision. He contacted the school principal, proposing a personal donation large enough to revitalize the struggling music program, while also pledging to mentor the students in life skills, ethics, and personal growth. The choice was not without hesitation. His ego wrestled with the idea of vulnerability, with the possibility of rejection or misunderstanding, but the courage he had witnessed in Sammy overrode the hesitation. This was no longer about appearances or amusement, it was about impact. Ethan's actions were not grand gestures designed for public recognition. He avoided press releases, social media announcements, and any form of self-aggrandizement. Instead, he wrote a simple letter to the principal, expressing his support and hope for the students' growth, and followed up with a personal visit to the school. The contrast between the sterile, high-rise world of Manhattan and the modest, warm classrooms of the school was stark. Children's laughter echoed through corridors decorated with colorful artwork, handmade posters, and instruments that had seen better days. Ethan felt a pang of humility, recognizing how insulated he had been from the everyday struggles and joys of ordinary life. During his visit, he watched as students rehearsed, their faces full of concentration, passion, and raw talent. He noticed a young girl struggling to hold her violin correctly, her expression tinged with frustration and self-doubt. Without thinking, Ethan offered guidance, recalling his own experiences with pressure and expectations. He spoke not as a billionaire CEO, but as a human being encouraging another human being. The students responded with surprise and admiration, not because of his wealth, but because of his genuine attention and willingness to engage on their level. Ethan also began reflecting on his relationship with his daughter, Lily. The experience at the school highlighted how disconnected he had been, and how his actions had been driven more by ego than empathy. He decided to take her along for future visits, involving her in mentoring sessions and exposing her to experiences that would teach both of them the value of humility, courage, and genuine human connection. This action not only deepened their bond but also allowed Ethan to see life from her perspective, fostering emotional growth that had long been neglected in his family. Meanwhile, Sammy continued to perform on the streets of Brooklyn, unaware of the ripple effect his courage had initiated. He played with the same dedication and heart, yet noticed small changes, more attention from passers-by, small donations, and even spontaneous acts of kindness from strangers inspired by his persistence. The narrative subtly underscores that courage can influence others without overt recognition, a theme deeply rooted in American cultural storytelling that emphasizes moral action over reward. The crescendo of Ethan's awakening occurred during a visit to the school's music room. A young boy, struggling with stage fright, had been reluctant to perform in front of his classmates. Ethan encouraged him gently, sharing a personal story of failure and resilience from his own youth. His words, honest and vulnerable, resonated with the boy, who eventually played his piece with newfound confidence. Observing the transformation, Ethan realized that courage was not about domination, control, or perfection, it was about vulnerability, empathy, and action in the face of fear. That evening, Ethan returned to his penthouse, a subtle but permanent change settling over him. He reflected on the past weeks, realizing that courage was a practice, not a singular event. It required persistence, humility, and willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about oneself. Sammy's influence had been instrumental. The musician's daily acts of bravery had opened a door for Ethan to engage with the world differently, not as a man seeking dominance, but as a man seeking connection, meaning, and moral integrity. Cinematic techniques highlight this emotional arc. Close-up shots of Ethan's face capture fleeting moments of doubt, resolve, and quiet satisfaction. Tracking shots follow him through both the bustling streets of Manhattan and the intimate school corridors, visually contrasting worlds of privilege and vulnerability. Ambient sounds blend children's laughter, violin strings, and distant city noise, creating an immersive sensory experience that mirrors Ethan's emotional journey. The section concludes with a subtle hook. Ethan, walking home late that night, passes a familiar street corner. Sammy is there, playing softly for the few who linger. Ethan stops, watching in quiet admiration, a deep smile forming. For the first time, he feels neither superiority nor judgment, only respect, gratitude, and the stirring recognition that courage, empathy, and moral action are the true measures of a life well lived. The collision of their worlds has set Ethan on a path of transformation, one that will continue to unfold in ways both profound and unpredictable. The days following Ethan's first acts of courage brought subtle changes in his daily rhythm. Instead of rushing through Manhattan streets in a relentless pursuit of meetings and deals, he found himself seeking moments of reflection. It was during one such walk that he deliberately stopped at the familiar Brooklyn street corner where Sammy Torres played. This time, he didn't linger on the distance or observe passively. He approached, quietly, respectfully, allowing himself to step into Sammy's world. The musician looked up mid-note, his expression neutral, yet his eyes registered the unusual attention. There was no condescension in Ethan's stance, no superiority in his posture, only genuine curiosity and a quiet openness that spoke volumes. "Hey," Ethan said softly, unsure of how to bridge the gap between his world and Sammy's. "I wanted to hear you play again." Sammy lowered his violin slightly, studying Ethan with a measured glance. "I thought you might," he said, his tone calm, almost as if he had anticipated this moment. The simplicity of his words disarmed Ethan, breaking down the remaining walls of arrogance and discomfort. In this brief exchange, a subtle bond began to form, one grounded in mutual recognition of humanity rather than social hierarchy. Over the next few days, Ethan returned repeatedly, sometimes to listen, sometimes to talk. Their conversations began cautiously, centering on music, Brooklyn neighborhoods, and shared experiences of life's challenges. Ethan learned about Sammy's upbringing, the struggles of a single-parent household, financial hardship, and the emotional burdens carried silently by those striving to survive in an indifferent world. In turn, Sammy learned about Ethan's life of privilege, the pressures of corporate responsibility, and the personal regrets that wealth and success could not erase. The dialogue was honest and unguarded, fostering empathy and understanding that transcended class, status, and preconceived notions. Cinematic framing emphasized this developing connection. Long shots captured Ethan and Sammy seated on a low brick wall, the backdrop a blend of urban grit and city lights. Close-ups captured fleeting expressions, a half-smile, a furrowed brow, eyes moist with unspoken reflection. Ambient sounds, the distant hum of traffic, the faint clatter of subway trains, and the soft vibrations of the violin, interwove with dialogue, creating a layered sensory experience that mirrored the emotional resonance of their growing friendship. Sammy shared with Ethan the philosophies that guided his life. He spoke about resilience, the quiet strength found in caring for family, and the importance of living authentically despite societal judgment. Ethan, listening intently, realized that Sammy's courage was not performative, it was a lived truth, a model of integrity and purpose. The contrast with Ethan's former worldview, where success was measured in wealth, influence, and appearances, was stark, yet profoundly inspiring. He felt compelled not only to understand but to emulate these qualities, recognizing their potential to enrich his own life and relationships. In turn, Ethan began sharing glimpses of vulnerability, the struggles behind the polished exterior of his life. He admitted the isolation of wealth, the subtle emptiness of achievement without connection, and the regret of lost time with family. These confessions, delivered without the veneer of control or superiority, were met with empathy rather than judgment. Sammy's responses were measured, insightful, and grounding. He reminded Ethan that transformation required patience, humility, and consistent action, lessons learned from the streets, from family, and from a lifetime of perseverance. The growing bond between them began to influence Ethan's interactions with others. He found himself approaching colleagues, employees, and family members with increased openness, patience, and understanding. His actions were no longer transactional or performative, they reflected an authentic desire to connect, uplift, and support. Lily noticed the changes most vividly. Father and daughter began spending afternoons together volunteering at local music programs, attending community events, and simply talking in ways that nurtured trust and affection. Vanessa, too, observed the subtle yet profound shift, offering quiet support while marveling at the man Ethan was becoming. Sammy, though unaware of the full scope of his influence, found encouragement in Ethan's presence. The musician's daily performances became imbued with a sense of purpose that transcended survival. He recognized that his music could inspire change, build empathy, and create bridges between disparate worlds. The narrative subtly highlights this moral lesson: acts of authenticity, courage, and compassion, no matter how small, can ripple outward, impacting lives far beyond the immediate circle. Tension and depth were maintained by occasional reminders of the societal and personal challenges that remained. Ethan's business world, with its cutthroat dynamics, demands, and superficiality, still loomed in the background. Sammy's life continued to require resilience and perseverance. Their friendship, though powerful, was tested by external pressures, creating suspense and emotional engagement. The audience was drawn into a story where trust and understanding were cultivated gradually, emphasizing realism alongside inspiration. The section culminates with a symbolic moment. Ethan and Sammy, sitting on the Brooklyn waterfront as the sun set over the East River, shared a silent observation of the city. The water reflected both light and shadow, the skyline representing ambition and struggle, wealth and simplicity, loss and hope. Sammy played a soft melody, the bow moving effortlessly across the strings, filling the evening with warmth and introspection. Ethan listened, eyes closed, absorbing not just the music, but the lessons embedded within it: courage, empathy, humility, and the enduring power of human connection. In this shared silence, the audience senses the depth of transformation, two men from entirely different worlds forging a bond that transcends status, expectation, and societal norms. The friendship becomes a vehicle for moral reflection and emotional resonance, demonstrating that genuine understanding and connection can bridge even the widest divides. The narrative leaves a lingering sense of hope, curiosity, and anticipation for the challenges and revelations yet to come, ensuring continued engagement and emotional investment. The crisp autumn air in Manhattan carried a sense of urgency as Ethan Caldwell walked briskly through the financial district. Despite the gold-plated offices and the hum of the city below, his mind was preoccupied with a challenge far more personal than any business deal: maintaining the integrity he had begun to discover within himself. Over the past weeks, his interactions with Sammy Torres and the local community had sparked a profound shift in his perspective, yet the pressures of wealth, status, and expectation remained relentless. This section would test whether his transformation was genuine or merely a fleeting sentiment born of novelty. The catalyst arrived in the form of a high-stakes investment meeting. Gregory Lane, Ethan's longtime rival, had orchestrated a lucrative but ethically questionable deal, one that promised immense profit but risked exploiting vulnerable communities. As the pitch unfolded in the gleaming boardroom, Ethan felt the familiar pull of ambition, the allure of prestige, wealth, and recognition. His peers, clad in tailored suits and polished shoes, exchanged approving glances, expecting him to endorse the proposal. For a moment, the old Ethan, the man who had once mocked a street musician for amusement, resurfaced, tempted by power and dominance. Yet, as he listened, memories of Sammy's music, his resilience, and the raw humanity it represented flashed through Ethan's mind. He thought of the children at the music program he had recently supported, the families in Brooklyn who relied on authenticity and fairness, and the quiet lessons of humility and courage that Sammy had imparted. The room, with its marble floors, mirrored walls, and echoing voices, seemed to shrink, transforming into a moral crucible where the weight of his choices was palpable. Ethan realized that this moment was not about money, it was about integrity, empathy, and the responsibility that came with privilege. Silence fell over the boardroom as Ethan slowly rose to speak. He outlined his objections, citing the potential harm to communities and emphasizing the importance of ethical considerations over short-term gain. His colleagues reacted with surprise, some with incredulity, and Gregory's smug expression faltered. Ethan's voice, steady yet imbued with newfound conviction, carried authority not derived from wealth, but from authenticity. This was a turning point. The man who once sought power above all else was now guided by empathy and moral clarity. Simultaneously, Sammy's influence was evident in subtle ways. The street musician had always acted from a place of principle, living honestly and striving to make a positive impact despite limited means. Ethan, having observed and internalized these values, applied them in a high-stakes corporate context, a stark contrast to his previous behavior. The narrative demonstrates the ripple effect of moral courage: acts of integrity, regardless of scale, inspire similar action in others and reinforce personal growth. The test extended beyond business. Later that evening, Ethan faced a private challenge with his daughter, Lily. She had discovered that a close friend was being treated unfairly in a school activity, pressured by peers and teachers alike. Ethan's instinct might once have been to intervene indirectly or offer advice from a distance. Instead, he chose to engage directly, listening attentively, validating her concerns, and helping her navigate the situation with fairness and empathy. His actions reinforced the lesson he had learned from Sammy: integrity is lived in both grand and intimate contexts, shaping relationships and fostering trust. At home, Vanessa observed the changes with quiet satisfaction. She noticed Ethan's growing humility, his attentiveness to others' struggles, and his willingness to confront ethical dilemmas even when inconvenient. These moments, though subtle, marked a departure from the man who had once valued image and status above all else. The moral weight of integrity was now a guiding principle, informing not only his professional decisions but also his family dynamics, friendships, and broader social interactions. Cinematic elements enhanced the emotional resonance of this section. Close-ups capture Ethan's eyes as he grapples with internal conflict, reflecting a mix of determination, apprehension, and quiet pride. Tracking shots follow him through the bustling streets and boardroom corridors, emphasizing the contrast between the impersonal world of wealth and the deeply personal journey of moral growth. Ambient sound, muted city noise, the subtle echo of voices, the faint memory of violin strings, underscores the ongoing influence of Sammy's music on Ethan's conscience. The climax of the section occurs when Ethan confronts Gregory directly. He articulates not just opposition, but vision, a strategy that balances profitability with ethical responsibility, demonstrating that wealth and integrity are not mutually exclusive. Gregory, caught off guard, experiences a rare moment of hesitation, recognizing that Ethan's moral compass has shifted. The confrontation is tense yet constructive, highlighting that courage and integrity often demand confrontation, risk, and vulnerability. Meanwhile, Sammy's story continues in parallel. He faces challenges in the neighborhood, limited resources, skepticism from some community members, and personal sacrifices, but remains steadfast in his principles. His quiet resilience and adherence to values serve as the unseen force guiding Ethan, reinforcing the narrative's central theme: true character is revealed not in comfort, but in the choices made when tested. The section concludes with a reflective, cinematic moment. Ethan, leaving the boardroom and stepping into the crisp night air, pauses at the edge of the city skyline. He gazes toward Brooklyn, imagining Sammy playing under the streetlights, and feels a profound sense of gratitude and resolve. The test of integrity has been passed, but the journey is ongoing. He has learned that moral courage, empathy, and ethical action are not temporary states but continuous practices that define a life of meaning and connection. The audience is left with anticipation, eager to witness how these lessons will shape the culmination of the story and the final emotional resolution. The evening air in Brooklyn carried a chill, but the streets were alive with the hum of ordinary life, vendors packing up, children laughing on stoops, and the distant rumble of subway trains beneath the city. At his familiar street corner, Sammy Torres tuned his violin with quiet focus, oblivious to the growing crowd that had begun to gather. His life had always been about persistence, authenticity, and sharing beauty with those who would pause long enough to notice. Yet tonight felt different, charged with an unspoken tension, as if the universe itself was waiting for something monumental to unfold. Ethan Caldwell approached, his steps deliberate and measured. The city had changed in his perception over the past weeks. Manhattan's chaos now seemed a backdrop rather than a barrier. He had faced boardrooms, rivalries, and moral dilemmas, and now he faced a test of emotional vulnerability. Standing across from Sammy, he felt the weight of what had been accomplished and what remained, the challenge of connecting across worlds, the confrontation of ego, and the embrace of genuine human emotion. "Sammy," Ethan began, voice steady but tinged with emotion, "I wanted to thank you, for everything. Not just your music, but, for showing me what it means to live with courage and integrity." Sammy paused mid-note, lowering his violin slightly. There was no judgment, only recognition, a mutual understanding that transcended words. This moment was the culmination of weeks of subtle lessons, internal reflection, and acts of empathy that had reshaped Ethan from the inside out. The street corner, once a stage of judgment and difference, now became a space of shared humanity. Ethan watched as Sammy played a melody he had heard countless times, yet tonight it felt richer, imbued with layers of story, struggle, and hope. Passers-by lingered, sensing the emotional weight of the performance, the palpable connection between the two men. The music, once merely entertainment, now carried the resonance of transformation, bridging gaps of wealth, experience, and life circumstance. Ethan felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, not from sorrow, but from recognition of the depth of human potential. He recalled the children he had supported at the music program, the colleagues whose perspectives he had begun to respect, and the family moments with Lily and Vanessa that had deepened his capacity for love. The lessons Sammy embodied, humility, courage, empathy, were no longer abstract ideals, they were lived truths that had reshaped Ethan's world. Sammy, in turn, observed Ethan's presence with quiet acknowledgement. He had no need for overt praise, yet he recognized the sincerity of Ethan's transformation. The street musician had always believed in the power of authenticity and small acts of courage to ripple outward, creating change that could not be forced but could be inspired. This moment, a confluence of worlds and experiences, demonstrated the profound impact of living according to one's principles. Cinematic tension heightened the scene, long shots captured the sprawling city skyline behind the two men, juxtaposing Manhattan's towering wealth against Brooklyn's grounded reality. Close-ups focused on subtle expressions, Ethan's mixture of awe and gratitude, Sammy's calm recognition, the soft glances of passers-by who sensed something extraordinary unfolding. Ambient sounds, the bow gliding across strings, distant traffic, muted conversations, wove into the score of the moment, underscoring the intimacy amidst urban vibrancy. The emotional stakes intensified as Ethan took a step closer, extending a hand not for formality, but in a gesture of solidarity, humility, and friendship. Sammy accepted the handshake, a simple act that symbolized the bridging of social divides, the merging of understanding, and the acknowledgement of shared humanity. The audience, both within the story and watching, sensed the weight of this connection, a wealthy man humbled and inspired, a street musician validated not by money, but by recognition of moral and emotional influence. This moment also highlighted the culmination of thematic contrasts, wealth versus humility, power versus empathy, status versus character. Ethan's transformation was not complete, nor was it effortless. It had been forged through discomfort, reflection, and persistent moral engagement. Sammy's example illuminated the path, yet the ultimate choice, the integration of lessons into daily life, rested with Ethan. The tension lay in whether he would continue this journey or revert to old habits. Simultaneously, the scene explored the moral dimension of action and consequence. Ethan's decisions had already begun to impact others, employees treated with fairness, children inspired by support and mentorship, family bonds strengthened. Sammy's music had served as both catalyst and mirror, emphasizing that authentic courage and integrity inspire transformation not only within oneself but across communities. The narrative demonstrated that moral lessons are most profound when tested in real-world contexts, where choices carry tangible emotional and social consequences. As the final notes of Sammy's melody lingered in the cool night air, Ethan closed his eyes, letting the resonance wash over him. Tears, unrestrained, rolled down his cheeks, a physical manifestation of emotional awakening, gratitude, and humility. The city around them continued in its relentless rhythm, yet for a brief moment, the two men existed in a bubble of shared understanding, a quiet yet profound testament to the power of empathy and human connection. The section closes with a lingering hook. Ethan, having faced the ultimate test of emotional honesty and moral reflection, is now poised for lasting transformation. Sammy's music fades softly, leaving the city's sounds to reclaim the space, yet the impact on Ethan and those around him is permanent. The audience is left with anticipation, reflecting on how courage, empathy, and integrity can shape lives and inspire hope in unexpected ways, setting the stage for resolution and catharsis. The transformation in Ethan Caldwell was no longer confined to personal reflection, it began to manifest outwardly, touching lives in ways both subtle and profound. Following his encounter with Sammy Torres, Ethan returned to his routines with a renewed sense of purpose, but now his actions carried intentionality rooted in empathy and moral awareness. Each decision, whether in business, family, or community, became a conscious effort to honor the lessons he had absorbed from Sammy's courage, authenticity, and unwavering integrity. At his office in Manhattan, Ethan implemented policies that emphasized fairness, compassion, and mentorship. He encouraged employees to share ideas, to voice concerns, and to participate in initiatives that prioritized ethical practices over mere profit. His leadership style shifted from commanding authority to inclusive guidance, fostering a workplace culture where individuals felt valued and empowered. Employees, previously accustomed to transactional interactions, noticed the difference immediately. The atmosphere became less tense, more collaborative, and surprisingly vibrant, as if the human element had finally been restored to the corporate environment. Meanwhile, his influence extended to family life in a deeply tangible way. Ethan spent more time with Lily, attending her school concerts, discussing her dreams, and mentoring her through challenges with patience and insight. He began actively listening to Vanessa, valuing her perspectives in both domestic and professional matters. Their home, once structured around schedules, obligations, and appearances, transformed into a space of warmth, dialogue, and emotional openness. Family dinners became opportunities for honest conversation, laughter, and the strengthening of bonds that had long been strained by neglect and pride. Ethan's newfound commitment to empathy also expanded into the community. Inspired by Sammy's example, he organized a series of workshops for local youth, combining mentorship with access to arts programs, business skills, and personal development opportunities. He leveraged his resources not for publicity, but to create lasting impact, funding scholarships, instruments, and materials for schools and community centers. Children who had previously faced limitations due to financial constraints now experienced encouragement, inspiration, and the possibility of growth. Parents expressed gratitude, noticing the tangible improvements in their children's confidence and creativity. Sammy's influence, though indirect in many cases, became evident across the neighborhood. His music continued to inspire passers-by, offering solace, hope, and motivation. Ethan began attending performances regularly, sometimes joining in small ways, sharing stories, offering encouragement, or facilitating support for local programs. Their friendship became a visible symbol of connection across social divides, illustrating the power of shared humanity. The narrative highlighted how genuine acts of kindness, courage, and integrity can ripple outward, creating a network of positive influence that extends far beyond the initial interaction. The cinematic framing of this section reinforces the emotional impact. Long shots capture Ethan walking through bustling streets, stopping to interact with community members, his presence now marked by humility and attentiveness rather than authority or prestige. Close-ups emphasize subtle expressions, the smile of a child receiving a donated violin, the tearful gratitude of a parent, the quiet pride in Sammy's eyes as he witnesses the change his music inspired. Ambient sounds, street chatter, laughter, the distant hum of city life, and the faint strains of violin music, create a layered auditory experience, enhancing the emotional resonance for the audience. Conflicts and challenges remain, reinforcing the narrative's realism. Not everyone accepts change immediately. Some colleagues question Ethan's motives, some neighbors remain skeptical, and obstacles continue to arise in the schools and community programs. These moments of tension serve to heighten the stakes, illustrating that transformation requires persistence, patience, and resilience. Ethan's response, grounded in empathy and integrity, reinforces the story's moral lesson. True impact emerges not from wealth, status, or superficial gestures, but from sustained, principled action in the face of adversity. At the heart of this ripple effect is the growing interconnection between the characters. Ethan's personal growth strengthens his family bonds, enhances professional relationships, and extends support to the broader community. Sammy's dedication continues to inspire, demonstrating that one individual's commitment to authenticity and courage can catalyze meaningful change in others. The interplay between their worlds, now intertwined through mutual respect and shared values, underscores the story's central theme: human connection, empathy, and moral courage can transcend social, economic, and cultural divides. A poignant scene unfolds one afternoon at the music program Ethan helped revitalize. Children perform a recital, showcasing not only their musical skills but also newfound confidence and collaboration. Ethan sits among the audience, a quiet smile on his face, while Sammy observes from the side, his violin case at his feet. The applause resonates not only for the performance but for the journey that brought these opportunities to life, the moral courage, empathy, and persistent effort that transformed possibility into reality. The moment encapsulates hope, emotional catharsis, and the tangible results of ethical and heartfelt action. The section closes with a reflective cinematic moment. Ethan and Sammy walk together along the Brooklyn waterfront at sunset, the city skyline reflecting in the calm water. They share a quiet conversation, acknowledging the changes, challenges, and growth that have emerged from their unlikely friendship. There is no fanfare, no need for recognition, just a profound sense of fulfillment, connection, and shared purpose. The audience is left with the realization that meaningful transformation is both personal and communal, emotional and practical, subtle and far-reaching, and that the ripple effect of courage and empathy can continue indefinitely. The morning sun cast a warm glow over Brooklyn, illuminating streets that had witnessed both struggle and triumph. Ethan Caldwell walked slowly along the familiar avenues, savoring the crisp air and the hum of life around him. The city, once a backdrop to ambition and superficial success, now felt alive in a way that resonated deep within him. Every interaction, every glance, and every small act of kindness carried meaning. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from arrogance and isolation to humility and emotional openness, and he felt a profound sense of gratitude. Ethan paused at the street corner where Sammy Torres played daily, now more than just a musician in his eyes. Sammy had become a mirror, reflecting the courage, empathy, and integrity Ethan had long neglected. Today, as the violin's bow danced across the strings, Ethan listened with reverence. The melody was familiar, yet it carried new layers of emotion, a testament to the passage of time, struggle, and the transformative power of human connection. In that music, Ethan recognized the culmination of his own awakening, the ability to feel deeply, act compassionately, and embrace the responsibility that came with privilege. The narrative now emphasized the emotional resolution of the story. Ethan's transformation had rippled outward, touching family, colleagues, and community members, creating a network of positive influence. Lily approached, violin in hand, ready to perform a small piece alongside Sammy. Ethan watched, heart swelling with pride and awe, realizing that the lessons of empathy, courage, and integrity had not only shaped his life but had begun to influence the next generation. This shared musical moment symbolized unity, continuity, and the enduring power of love and mentorship. Cinematic techniques enhanced the impact. Close-ups captured Ethan's eyes glistening with tears, Lily's concentration and excitement, and Sammy's serene focus. Long shots revealed the interplay of urban architecture and natural light, blending the warmth of human connection with the vibrancy of city life. The ambient sounds of passing pedestrians, distant traffic, and violin strings created a layered sensory experience, emphasizing the harmony between personal growth and communal life. The audience could feel both intimacy and scale, the personal and societal significance of the transformation. Ethan's internal reflection deepened as he considered the moral lessons embedded in his journey. He recognized that wealth and privilege, while providing opportunity, were not sufficient for a meaningful life. True fulfillment emerged from acts of kindness, empathy, and courageous moral choices. His experiences with Sammy had shown him that authenticity and integrity could inspire others, fostering a cycle of positive influence that transcended status or economic power. Every decision he had made since the awakening, supporting youth programs, mentoring employees, rebuilding family bonds, was a testament to this principle in action. Family dynamics reached a new level of intimacy. Vanessa, observing the quiet transformation in Ethan, felt a renewed sense of partnership and shared purpose. Their conversations, once practical and transactional, now carried depth, mutual respect, and emotional resonance. Lily's admiration and trust had deepened, fostering a bond that went beyond parental obligation into true mentorship and companionship. The family unit, once fractured by neglect and ambition, now exemplified warmth, understanding, and authentic connection. These developments reflected contemporary American cultural values of family, emotional intelligence, and relational growth. The ripple effect continued to manifest in the broader community. Children at the revitalized music program performed confidently, demonstrating both skill and resilience. Parents and neighbors observed with pride and gratitude, their lives subtly enriched by the presence of committed mentors and compassionate leaders. Ethan's engagement had created opportunities, but it was Sammy's ongoing example, daily perseverance, humility, and authenticity, that anchored the moral foundation. The story emphasized that transformation is a shared endeavor, requiring both guidance and example, action and inspiration. Tension and resolution intertwined as Ethan faced a final, quiet test. A corporate opportunity arose that promised immense financial gain but required cutting corners and compromising ethical standards. For a moment, he felt the old tug of ambition, a whisper of the man he once was. Yet the lessons he had internalized, the courage to act with integrity, the empathy for those affected, and the example set by Sammy, guided his choice. He declined the opportunity, opting instead to pursue a path that balanced profitability with ethical responsibility, demonstrating that true success is measured not by accumulation, but by impact and moral clarity. The climactic moment unfolded with a simple yet powerful act of human connection. Ethan, Sammy, and Lily played music together on the street corner as passers-by paused to listen, their attention drawn not to wealth or status, but to authenticity, creativity, and shared emotion. The performance symbolized reconciliation, growth, and the beauty of relationships nurtured by empathy and integrity. The audience witnessed the tangible outcome of moral courage, a community uplifted, a family bonded, and a man transformed. As the sun set over the East River, Ethan and Sammy walked side by side, their conversation easy, comfortable, and filled with quiet joy. There was no need for grandeur or accolades, the richness of the moment lay in connection, understanding, and the fulfillment of moral and emotional growth. Ethan's heart, once hardened by pride and ambition, now beat in sync with the rhythms of compassion, courage, and gratitude. The section, and story, concluded with a cinematic tableau, the skyline bathed in golden light, the river reflecting both city and sky, and three figures standing together, united by trust, empathy, and the transformative power of human connection. The moral resonance was clear. A heart willing to change can inspire hope, rebuild relationships, and create a ripple effect that transcends the self, leaving the world better than it was found.